Hi, wonderful humans, and welcome to the Digital Influencers Masterclass, running as part of the Next Gen Awards 2024. My name is Scott, and I'm incredibly excited to be chatting to you this afternoon as we look at how we can build and grow our own influencer brands as young people across Australia. Let's dive in. Now, the Digital Influencers Masterclass has been designed as a free masterclass to help you as a young person build your skills, build your knowledge, and build your experience to help bring an idea to life at any age from anywhere. This free masterclass this afternoon is being run as part of the Next Gen Awards to look at specifically how we can build, launch, and grow our own brands as social media influencers. Before we begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're all gathering and extend my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, as mentioned, my name is Scott, and I'm going to be your MC and facilitator for the masterclass this afternoon. A bit about who I am and why I'm here chatting to you guys. I'm 24 years old, and I'm actually the CEO and founder of BOP Industries, the organization running the Next Gen Awards. I started BOP back when I was 14 years old, about 10 years ago, as part of a school business program when I was in year 9, selling keyrings at local markets. And now my work at BOP gets to see me traveling across the country and around the world, working with young innovators and young change makers, showing them how they can build their skills in innovation, entrepreneurship, and STEM, and how they can use those skills to get a head start on their chosen pathway and bring their ideas to life. For me, along my career, I've worked with about 100,000 students in 36 cities around the world. I'm one of the top 30 CEOs under 30 years of age, and I'm also Queensland's young small business leader. So I'm really excited to be sharing some of my own experiences and my own insights with you as part of this webinar. Now, a bit about why I'm chatting to you guys about influencing specifically. Well, for me, I started building my personal brand as an influencer back when I was about 14, 15 years old, when I first started my business. For me, my influencer brand is a little less Kim Kardashian and a little more Richard Branson, I like to think. And I consider myself a bit of an influencer in the startup and entrepreneurship space. For me, my main platforms that I really love to hang out on are Instagram and LinkedIn. I also have a bit of a Twitter account as well, or X now, I think it's called. But I do a lot of work and do a lot of posting, building my personal brand as an educator, as a young entrepreneur, and as someone quite active in the startup and innovation community. And for me, being able to build that influencer brand has given me some really amazing opportunities. As part of that brand, I've got to do trade missions and trips all around Asia, blogging and vlogging. I've got exclusive invitations to different events happening across the country to share my experiences from that event. And I also do a great deal of keynote speaking on the power of young people and the role of Generation Z in the workforce. So for me, whilst I don't have that sort of traditional influencer brand that we quite often think about when we think of the word influencer, I've been able to build my personal brand over the past 10 years and leverage that for a whole range of opportunities in business, which has been really, really exciting. So as mentioned, as part of this masterclass, I'm going to be sharing some of my own insights, my own experiences, and my own learnings with you of how I've grown my influencer brand to help you grow your own. Now, as far as what we're actually going to be looking at this afternoon, our Digital Influencers Masterclass, it's been designed to help you build your influence on social media. It's going to be looking at how you can grow your audience, showcase your ideas, and eventually commercialize your brand as an aspiring young professional. So by the end of this masterclass, we're going to be looking at how we can find a platform and a niche relevant to our interests. At the end of the day, if we're going to be influencing, we want to make sure we're going to be influencing about something we're passionate about and something we're interested in. We're going to be developing a strong influencer brand and a bit of an influencer persona. We're going to create a brand plan to design engaging content for our audience, and we're going to be exploring how we can grow our influencer brand as well. So it's going to be a pretty action-packed session, but the good news is this is going to be recorded. So if you would like to go back to any of the things that I'm talking about as part of this masterclass, you can really easily rewind and rewatch. And if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to send us an email at info@bopindustries.com. Our team are always happy to provide some more information or answer any questions you might have. So as far as this masterclass, it's actually happening as part of the Next Gen Awards. So for any of you that are watching that do build a pretty awesome influencer brand and you're like, hey, I'd love to get a bit more recognition, make sure to check out the Next Gen Awards. The Next Gen Awards are a national awards program designed to showcase the next generation of top young talent. Entries for the awards are open to all Australian primary and high school students as well as their educators, and we have 6 categories up for grabs, including the Young Innovator of the Year, the Young Entrepreneur of the Year, the Young Leader of the Year, Year, the Innovative Educator of the Year, the Gen Z of the Year, and also the Dream Team of the Year. These 6 award categories are now open for nominations. You can nominate yourself or someone you know, and nominations are open until the 15th of July, 2024. So if you haven't already, make sure to check out bopindustries.com/next-gen and submit your nomination. We would absolutely love to find out more about what you're up to. And as part of our Next Gen Awards, it won't just be the BOP team and the Next Gen team reviewing those entries. We have an amazing lineup of judges joining us from across the country, which has been really fantastic to see. These judges are all going to be sitting on different judging panels for each award category, and they're all experts in their field. So I know they're really excited to meet our Next Gen nominees and see the projects they're leading. And I can't start this masterclass without saying a massive thank you to our sponsors of the Next Gen Awards. This masterclass is free and available to young people all across the country, thanks to these fantastic organizations. And you can support us by supporting them. So make sure to head to the Next Gen website, reach out to these sponsors, and find out a bit more about what they're doing for young people. Because at the end of the day, the reason they're sponsoring is because they're passionate about supporting young people like yourself, bring ideas to life, and make a change in their community. So let's get started with the masterclass and start by having a look at the influencer pathway. Now, I know I touched on this before, but I think quite often when we talk about the concept of being a social media influencer, we have a very strong stereotype in our mind of what an influencer looks like. But becoming an influencer, it's actually a lot more achievable than you might think. When it comes to becoming a social media influencer, I wanted to start with a couple of statistics for you, just to give you a guide of what this looks like as a pathway. Now, in 2023, just last year, the value of the influencer marketing industry was $21 billion, which is massive. That's essentially the amount of money that brands paid influencers to promote their products and the amount of money influencers generated from selling their own product. So there's a lot of money in becoming a social media influencer. It's been found that 93% of marketers have used influencer marketing at least once. So that means a lot of businesses are considering how they can use influencers to promote their brand. And 61% of consumers say that they trust their favorite influencers' recommendations. So as an influencer, take your audience very seriously because they really do trust what you have to say. Now, when it comes to how much influencers can make, I've done a bit of research and found a bit of an influencer pay scale for you all, just as a bit of reference. So when we talk about influencers, we normally have 5 key categories based on how many followers you have on any given platform. Now, these pay scales are just as a guide. It's an average based on a bit of research, but this is how much influencers can earn at each level. So we've firstly got our nano influencers. They've got less than 10,000 followers, and they're earning between 20 and $100 per post, which is a pretty good way to get started. Then you go to your micro influencers that typically have between 10,000 and 50,000 followers, earning $100 to $450 per post. Our mid influencers have somewhere between 50 and 500,000 followers. So they've got a pretty decent following at this point, and they might be starting to consider doing influencing full time. They're normally getting paid between $450 and $2,500 per post. Then you have those macro influencers. They're those quite large accounts and very typically globally well-known influencers with 500,000 to 1 million followers. And they're earning between $2,500 and $7,000 per post. And then finally, you've got those mega influencers, those celebrities, those superstars with over 1 million followers, and they're earning in most cases, over $7,000 for a single post on a social media platform. So as you can see, as an influencer, you can actually make some pretty decent money, which I think is pretty cool as a young person considering their career options. Now, as far as what this looks like in action, I wanted to share 2 of my favorite examples of influencers that have been able to build a really strong brand for themselves, doing something that they love. And the first one is Simone Gertz. Now, Simone Gertz, her preferred platform is YouTube, and she's got some amazing YouTube videos I'd highly recommend you check out. And Simone prides herself as one of the best inventors of useless things. Essentially, Simone, she loves engineering, she loves STEM, she loves tinkering, she loves robotics. And she said, well, what if I created a YouTube channel where I could record myself building robots? But instead of building like your typical robots, what if I built robots that were designed to fail? And she did exactly that. She created a drone that would try and cut your hair with a pair of scissors. It's just as dangerous as it sounds. She even had an alarm clock that would wake her up in the morning by slapping her in the face with a rubber hand. All sorts of really funny little robots like that. This worked really well for her. She amassed over 2.6 million subscribers on YouTube and over 160 million views. And she's now a full-time content creator, and she gets to travel across the country and around the world, getting to work with different brands and different creators to invent useless robots and to invent robots that don't work. So for her, she's really been able to take that passion of robotics, engineering, and STEM and turn that into a career pathway as an influencer. Now, someone that's done it a little bit differently is the owner of Doug the Pug. Now, for anyone that doesn't follow Doug the Pug on Instagram, I would highly recommend it. It's some of the most wholesome content you will see on your social media feeds. And Doug was actually one of the first Instagram animal influencers. His owner, Leslie, created his Instagram account back in 2013, initially just with some photos of him out on walks around the house and taking naps because he snores like a freight train. What she did was she started that account, had say 30 followers, just some friends and family. But really quickly that grew to 300 followers, then 3,000. Now Doug the Pug has over 3.7 million followers on Instagram and over 12 million followers on his various social media platforms. And now he and his owner Leslie get to travel around the world, collaborating with all sorts of really cool brands like Stranger Things and Voss Water, and taking photos with influencers like Ed Sheeran, Billie Eilish, and Barack and Michelle Obama, which is pretty awesome. So if you're someone that has an adorable pet, you might not even create an influencer account for yourself, you might create one for them, and it can take you to some pretty exciting places. So those are just two examples of people that have been able to build a full-time job and build a career out of becoming a social media influencer, just to give you a little bit of inspiration. So when it comes to where do you start, how do you become a Simone Gertz or how do you become Doug the Pug? Well, firstly, you've got to lay the foundations and figure out the basics of your influencer brand. And there are a few key things that come into this. The first one is picking your platform, trying to figure out which platform that you'd like to be creating content on. Now, I typically recommend picking one, maybe two platforms. It can be really tempting to try and do all of these platforms at once and be churning out YouTube videos and Instagram posts and LinkedIn posts and Pinterest pins and everything like that. But typically as a young person, we don't have a lot of time to dedicate to these hobbies and these side hustles. So I'd recommend picking one, maybe two platforms and think about the sort of content you want to create. If you really like those sort of long form, sort of vlog videos, YouTube might be the platform for you. If you prefer something short, sharp, and really action-packed, TikTok might be for you. But if you're really great at creating visuals, you might want to consider something like like Pinterest or like Instagram. But if you really like to write and you're a great writer, LinkedIn or X might be a platform for you. So firstly, think about what sort of platform that you want to be creating content on and pick one, maybe two platforms. Then you also want to think about what sort of niche you're going to try and target and what type of influencer you want to be. Now, there are hundreds of influencer niches, but on screen I've got 6 of the most popular. We see a massive amount of gaming influencers that will record themselves and live stream as they're playing different video games. You could become a beauty influencer, showcasing your skincare routine or your latest makeup looks. A travel influencer who's showcasing all of the amazing places you and or your family might be traveling, or all of the amazing places around your local community. You've then got things like lifestyle influencers that talk about productivity hacks and staying healthy. You've got those health and fitness influencers that showcase their favorite workout routines. And then someone like a sport or entertainment influencer that's reviewing some of their favorite sporting matches. So as well as picking a platform, you've also got to think about what niche you want to pick. What is that one thing you want to be known for? And when it comes to picking your niche, I would say that don't be afraid to think small. Some of the most successful influencers pick a really, really, really specific niche. And you can see on the screen here, someone's recorded a video with 27 styles of rapping. And that video has 32 million views. There are some other really funny ones as well. I'll make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see. 2.7 million views for trash or pass, for 27 different styles of rapping. The top 10 tips for beginner boulderers, for people that love rock climbing, and different reviews of different board games as well. So you never know what people are going to watch. And sometimes if you pick a really specific niche, something that you're incredibly passionate about, chances are there are probably hundreds and thousands, if not millions of other people out there that are just as passionate as you are. So consider what your niche might be as an influencer. Now, a really good example of someone that's done this and done this really, really well is Francis Burgess, who is a TikTok influencer, also known as the Train Guy. Now, Francis, he went viral during COVID. Back when we were all stuck at home making sourdough, trying to figure out what to do with our spare time, Francis said, well, look, why don't I go out and I'm going to go train spotting? Now, Francis is a massive train nerd. He loves locomotive trains. And what he did was he created this piece of headgear that he'd wear like a helmet, and it had one GoPro facing his face and another GoPro facing whatever he could see. And what he would do is he'd go out to train stations and bridges by train tracks, and he would just watch trains go by, and he would get so excited. He'd be telling the audience about what type of train it is, what sort of engine it has, how many carriages it has, where it's going, and just fun facts about that train. And whilst you may think it's incredibly niche, it actually went really well. He gained over 2.6 million followers on TikTok, 1.6 million on Instagram, and now he gets to travel around the world doing collaborations with brands like Gucci and the North Face and just getting to nerd out about trains. So when I say find a niche and don't be afraid to think too small, Francis is a really good example of this. Someone that said, look, I'm going to pick a really specific niche. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it really well. And it's worked incredibly well for him. Now, once you've picked your niche, you also want to think about what your persona is going to be. Now, when it comes to building an influencer brand, if you are creating an influencer brand about yourself, how you turn up online doesn't necessarily need to be what you're like in real life. Even for myself, I do a lot of keynote speaking, I do a lot of presenting, make a lot of videos, and I always say that for me, the Scott Millar that gets on stage and creates all these videos isn't necessarily the same Scott that I am when I hang out with my friends on the weekend. I see Scott Millar almost like a character. Now for me, I'm a massive performing arts nerd, so I always love linking this back to drama and musical theatre, but I encourage you to think about your influencer brand as a character. What sort of character do you want to be? Now, this can be really helpful to make sure that you're staying on brand and on message. It can also help you find the difference between how you turn up online and what you're like in real life, but can also help you when you get some feedback. Now, when you are putting yourself out there online and you're making content, not everyone is going to love your content. You might get some negative feedback, you might get some negative comments, and it's important to not take those personally. And for me, that's where I really find having Scott Millar as that character. Whenever I get a bit of feedback, I can say, okay, well, I'm going to look at that character and I'm going to tweak it just a little bit to make it better. And me as Scott, I get to keep going on as I am. So once you've found your audience, once you found your platform, once you found your niche, you want to start thinking about your persona. And I always think about these 5 elements when creating your influencer persona. The first one is your vocabulary. So what sort of words will your influencer persona use when you speak? What's your tone of voice? Are you really formal, very researched, incredibly scientific and academic? Or are you really casual and relaxed and fun? Your reputation. If you had to describe your persona or your influencer brand in 3 words, what would you say? Are you really fun, loud, and energetic? Are you really quiet, calm, and relaxing? What sort of words would you use to describe your persona? Your twin. So if your influencer had a celebrity twin, who would it be? Are you the Lizzo of train spotting? Are you the Beyonce of knitting? Think about what your celebrity twin might be. Your clothing. So obviously think about if you are creating photos or videos, what would your influencer persona wear? Are you going to rock up in like shorts and a t-shirt? Are you going to be wearing like glamorous gowns or tuxedos and suits and ties? What sort of clothes are you going to wear? And finally, what sort of a person do you want to be known as? What's your digital persona and personality going to be like? Do you want to be known as really friendly, really kind, and really giving? Do you want to be incredibly intelligent, incredibly driven, and incredibly good at what you do? So I recommend taking a little bit of time now. If you've got a piece of pen and paper, if you have a notes page open on your device, make a couple of notes, thinking about firstly, what are 1 or 2 platforms you might choose to create your influencer brand on? What might your niche be? What's that topic you're going to talk about? And what is your persona? And if you did want to take a screenshot of this slide, this could be really handy so you can go back and answer these questions a little bit later. Now, someone that's done a really good job of creating an audience persona is, an influencer persona is Corporate Natalie. Now, Corporate Natalie got famous on TikTok, again, during lockdown. I think we're noticing a bit of a theme here. We had a lot of extra time, got dedicated to TikTok, and a lot of influencers got pretty famous. And what Corporate Natalie does is she creates videos targeted at 18 to 35-year-olds in the workforce. And she sort of adopts the persona of what it's like being different co-workers working in a company. And she creates a lot of really funny videos. Now, she jokes that her name is Corporate Natalie, and sometimes she'll dress up as the finance person and pretend to be finance, hassling you for a budget request. She sometimes dresses up as like the human resources and HR person and gets cranky at you for doing the wrong thing at Christmas party. And sometimes she'll pretend to be your Gen Z coworker who just keeps talking in TikTok references. But this has worked really well for her. She's really owned that persona. And while she's not like that in her free time, it's what her audience are looking for. And this has worked so well for her that she's amassed over 650,000 followers on TikTok and 35 million likes. And she now gets to create some really awesome content aligned with some really awesome brands. So spend a bit of time thinking about your digital persona and your influencer persona as well. Once you've done that, then we're going to start having a look at understanding your audience. So once you've laid those foundations, you know what platform you're going to be creating content on, you know what sort of niche you're going to be creating content about, and you know what sort of persona you're going to be turning up as. It's important to think about your audience next up and think about what are they really looking for out of the content that you create. Let's dive into understanding your audience. So when it comes to understanding your audience, I always recommend creating a bit of an audience persona. Now, this is something that most businesses will use to understand who their customers are. And for you guys as influencers, your customers are really your followers. They're the people that are turning up, that are liking your comments, liking your posts, that are commenting on your posts, that are engaging with your content. And it's important to think about who they are and what they want out of your content. Are they following you because they think you're really funny? Are they following you because you have really informative information for them? Or are they following you for some different reason? Now, for this, we talk about audience personas. And on the screen, I've got examples of 3 personas that Spotify uses, the music streaming platform. And for them, when it comes to using Spotify, you might be thinking, well, how does a company like Spotify, with hundreds of millions of users, narrow it down to just 3 types of people? Well, what they've done is they've got the passive, the curator, and the nostalgic. And these are the 3 types of personas that they say all of their customers, their whole audience falls into. So when we think about Spotify as a music streaming platform, they first think about the passive. The passive is someone that uses Spotify and just has music on in the background all of the time. They don't really care what song is playing. They don't really care what artist it is. They just sort of find a playlist they like, they hit shuffle, and they just keep music on all of the time in the background. When they're working, when they're in the car, when they're hanging out with friends, they've always got that music on. Then they talk about their second persona being the curator. Now, the curator is someone that really loves creating the perfect playlist, and they have a playlist for every reason. They've got a playlist for hanging out with friends. They have a playlist for studying. They have a playlist for playing sport. And they're always adding songs on and taking songs off of those different playlists. And then finally, you have the nostalgic. Now, the nostalgic, they know what they like. They've got a few key artists. They have a few key bands that they're obsessed with, and they listen to those people on repeat. And they're always wanting to find out when their favorite artists are releasing new music, when they're touring, and when they're releasing new bits of merch as well. So for Spotify, whilst they have hundreds and millions of people in their audience, they've narrowed it down to those 3 people: the passive, the curator, and the nostalgic. And they understand what each of those personas need out of Spotify. The passive needs good playlists that have just got music that they're going to like. The curator needs the ability to really specifically edit, add songs on, take songs off of all of their playlists. And the nostalgic needs all of the information, all of the songs about their favorite artists, and they need it quickly. So that's something that Spotify does. And I want you to think about who your audience might be and think about your audience persona. Again, if you've got a piece of paper or a notes page, now's a perfect time to hit pause and answer some of these questions, looking at the 6 following elements. Firstly, your persona bio. Now, I'd recommend creating maybe 2 or 3 different types of personas for the different types of people that might be following you. For example, you might have a parent that follows you, someone that follows you because you have really informative content. You might also have someone in their mid-20s following you because they think you're really funny and it's really relatable. And then you might also have someone a little bit younger that follows you because they want to be like you when they grow up. So think about the 3 different types of people or 2 different types of people that might follow you, and tell me some high-level information about them. How old are they? Where do they live? What are their hobbies? Who are they as a person? Then tell me the why. So what are they looking for in an account like yours? What value do you add them as someone that is scrolling through Instagram, following accounts on TikTok? Then tell me, who are they following? So what other accounts do you think they follow on your platform of choice? Are they following a whole bunch of other influencers just like you, or are they following people totally different? And with that, think about what they look for out of that platform. What is their favorite content on that platform? And maybe even do a bit of research and see if you can find 5 examples of past posts or past videos from other accounts that you think they might like. Obviously, you want to make it real, give this persona a name and some defining features. And finally, tell me what frustrates them with other accounts that are out there. What's your point of difference going to be? Out of all of the other people in your niche and on your platform, what can you do differently to stand out from the crowd? So, as mentioned, maybe hit pause now. Take a couple of minutes, write some answers to these questions down on a piece of paper or a notes page, and try creating 2 or 3 audience personas, thinking about the types of people that might follow your account. And always hold these audience personas close, because whenever you're creating content, you want to come back to these and think about what they're looking for. I'll give you a little bit of time to do that now. Alrighty, so we've created our audience personas. The next step is to analyze our competitors. It's important before we do start creating any content that we do a little bit of research. We figure out who else might our audience be following, who else is out there on these platforms and playing in our niches, so we can make sure we can stand out from the crowd. Now, competitor analysis is something that all businesses do. And at the end of the day, as a social media influencer, you are a business too. You've got to think about what your point of difference is. So I would recommend doing a little bit of research, finding 3 to 5 different accounts that are similar to the account that you want to create, and do a bit of research and see what sort of content are they creating. Now, again, on a piece of paper or on a notes page, I'd recommend writing down the following 5 headings and making some notes under each of these for each account. So firstly, try and figure out what sort of content are they posting about? Are they posting really funny videos? Are they posting really insightful blog posts? Are they posting really beautiful images? Then have a look at their aesthetic. So what does the design look like? Are they really focused on like neutral, minimal colors? Is it bright? Is it loud? Is it full of neon colors? What sort of aesthetic do they have with their posts? Also think about how much information do they have in a post? Are they chocked full of as much information as possible, or are they very relaxed and only have a few little bits of information? Then I recommend doing a bit of deep diving, do a bit of stalking and see what posts of theirs have the most likes and the most comments. So you can see what engages their audience best. And again, when we see what posts work best for them, we can start to take a bit of inspiration from that and say, well, okay, if their audience really likes insightful blog posts that are sort of like 3 top tips for, or 5 top tips for, or 5 ways to do this, then maybe I need to be creating content like that as well, because they've already figured out that's what their audience wants. And my audience is quite similar. Also, have a look at their hashtags. We'll get to this a little bit later, but hashtags are really important for growing your account and becoming discoverable on different social media platforms. So see if they do post hashtags in any of their posts. Do they put it in the initial caption? Do they put it in the first comment? And what sort of hashtags are they using? And finally, what's their brand voice? So going back to that influencer persona, what sort of persona do they adopt? Are they incredibly formal? Are they super relaxed? Are they really high energy? Are they really serious? How do they talk? What sort of words do they use in their captions and their posts? So it's really important to take a little bit of time to do some competitor analysis. And I would recommend, again, hitting pause now, spending a couple of minutes on a piece of paper or on your notes page, identifying 3 to 5 different accounts that are similar to the account you want to create, doing a bit of research and answering these questions for them. I'll give you some time to do that now. Alrighty, so hopefully you've hit pause, you've done your competitor analysis, and you found some different accounts like yours. Next up, it's time to look at actually creating content. Now, this is the fun stuff. This is the stuff that every influencer really enjoys. And at the end of the day, this is why people become influencers, because they really enjoy and they're really good at creating content to engage their audience. They are really funny, or they're really smart, or they're just really in touch with who their audience is. And before we dive too deep into content, I wanted to loop back to those influencer audience personas that you guys created, understanding who your followers are, who your audience is, and what they're looking for out of your account. Because at the end of the day, when you are creating content for your audience, you want to make sure that it's something that your audience are always going going to want. Sometimes you as an influencer might want to do something a little different, but it's important to think about the people that are following you, the people that are liking your posts, and the people that are commenting on your posts. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones you want to be creating content for. So it's important to always keep those audience personas handy. I know for me, I quite often have them either on like the home screen of my computer or like hung up on a wall by my desk. So whenever I have a question, whenever I'm like, oh, what sort of content should I create next? Should I do this brand partnership? I always go back to my audience personas and say, is this something my audience would actually like? Is this something that they'd want? So let's dive into creating content and some of my top tips for how you can do that effectively. Now, when it comes to creating content, you might be sort of sitting there saying, well, how do I do it? Where do I start? And I always use a really good rule of thumb with 4 different content pillars. Now, for anyone that is on social media, you want to have a bit of diversity to the types of things that you're posting. You don't want to post the same thing again and again and again. And I know for all of us that are on social media, we've seen so many influencers do this before, and it gets really old, it gets really boring, and it gets really tired really, really quickly. So for me, I always recommend when you're creating content and creating a bit of a content calendar, which we'll get to in just a second, have a think about moving between these 4 content pillars. Now, I would say if you're posting, say, once a week, you might do week 1, you're going to do a post about entertainment. Week 2, you're going to do an educational post. Week 3, you're going to do an inspirational post. And week 4, you're going to do a promotional post. It's important to keep a really good balance of this with your audience, because if you go too hard down one angle, you're probably going to start to lose followers. And if you do any of those experiments, I recommend watching your engagement metrics and your follower metrics really, really closely, because whilst it is okay to do experiments, if you find you're losing too many followers or your engagement is dipping too much, you probably want to self-correct and go back to doing more of what your audience really like. But what do these pillars actually look like? Well, firstly, you have the entertainment pillars. And that, for most of us when we're on social media, is a lot of what we're looking for. We want to be entertained. We want to smile. We want to laugh. And that's what most influencers do really well jumping on. Now, when it comes to those sort of entertainment posts, you might want to create some really bingeable content, like jump on a trend, create something really easy to watch, something really easy to share. You might want to make your audience laugh. You might want to make your audience feel something. But when it comes to those entertainment posts, you want to think about having something that's super shareable. Go back to the sort of posts that you've liked and that you've shared to your friends yourself and think about, well, what sort of stuff do you share? And what sort of stuff would your audience persona share? Next up, as well as those really light, fun, entertaining posts, you then want to do some educational posts. So try and teach your audience something. Now, depending on what sort of niche you're in, you might not want to go too hard on the education route, but also depending on the niche you're in, you might go really hard on the education route. And when it comes to education, you might want to teach your audience a new skill. You might want to answer a frequently asked question that you always get in the comment section. You might want to share your top tips for doing what you do, or you might want to review a product that you really like or you really don't like. But those sort of education posts, you want to give something back to your audience. Beyond just making them laugh, making them smile, you want to teach them something as well. So we've done entertainment, we've done education. Next up is inspiration. So those sort of inspirational posts. Now, we as humans, we always want to be inspired. We always look at people and say, wow, I want to be like them, or wow, I could do that. And when it comes to some inspirational posts, I really recommend sometimes sharing your story or sharing the story of others. Whatever niche you've picked, tell people about how you got there, or find other people working in your industry or working in your niche and share their stories. You might want to set a challenge and do a bit of a giveaway, get your audience engaging with you and give them the opportunity to be featured on your platform as well. But find ways to lift your audience up, really inspire them and show them how they can do what you do as well. And finally, our final pillar is promote and promotion. And for us as an influencer, that's how we make money. That's the core part of our business model. Now, not every influencer has to do this promotional lens. Not every influencer has to take money and things like that. But it is really important if you do want to make a bit of money to factor in those promotional posts. Now, similar to the other types of posts, you don't want to do these too often. Once every sort of 4 posts is okay. But again, just monitor your engagement and your follower metrics to see, how your audience are feeling about all of these promotions. Now, these promotional posts, I always recommend trying to be as authentic as possible. People these days are really adverse to ads. We sort of see an ad and we shut down straight away. We swipe past it on TikTok, we hit mute on the TV, or we just sort of like look away when we're walking in the street. So some of the best influencers, they always sort of weave ads and promotion into their content. But this is a great opportunity for you to collaborate with other brands, where a brand might pay you money to feature their product or review their product. It might give you an opportunity to collaborate with another influencer, where you can create a piece of content together that they share to their audience and you share to your audience. Or you might sort of share some insights into different businesses that you're really enjoying that are operating in your industry. But when promoting, always make sure A, that it's relevant to your audience, B, that it's useful information you're giving them, and C, that it's something authentic. As we touched on at the very, very beginning, audiences really trust influencers. And it's a really hard thing to build that trust with your audience. So make sure once you've built that trust that you're keeping it. So when it comes to creating content, I always recommend looking at those 4 pillars: entertain, educate, inspire, and promote. And when it comes to content creation, as well as moving through those pillars, whilst you create different types of content, you always want to make sure that your content is on brand, that it looks cohesive. Now, most influencers, when you go through their accounts, they've actually got a pretty clear formula of how they create their posts. Whether it's a video on TikTok, whether it's a video on YouTube, a post on LinkedIn, or something entirely different, all of these posts typically follow a similar formula, because that's what the influencers have done. They've tried a whole bunch of different types of posts with their audience. They've seen what posts work and what posts don't, and they've really leaned into the posts that do work to start using that as a bit of a formula. And when it comes to that formula, aesthetics are really important. And I've got some screenshots here of just a couple of Instagram feeds of different accounts that have really lent into their aesthetic. So as well as creating your influencer persona of how you want to appear, you also want to think about the visuals associated. What sort of colors are you using? What sort of fonts are you using? And what sort of format are you using as well? Are you posting mostly visuals, mostly text, or something in between? So that content creation piece is really, really important to make sure that all of your content is on brand. Now, as far as how we actually bring that all together when it comes to creating content, where you're creating all of these different posts under different pillars with different visuals, I always recommend creating a content calendar or a bit of a content schedule. Now, it can be really hard to keep up to date with content, particularly as a young person. We go through school holidays where we might not always be home. We go through assessment periods where we might not have time to create all of this content. But the great thing you can do is start to plan ahead. Now, for me, I personally love to do all of my content planning once every 3 months. So for us as young people, that's like once a term. For me, I normally sit down and I'll spend 1 or 2 days creating all of my content for the following 3 months. And that is writing all of the captions, figuring out when I'm going to post, planning my hashtags, and also thinking about what sort of visuals are going to accompany each post. And I'll put them into a bit of a content calendar. And you can see this content calendar here on screen. It's just been created in a Excel spreadsheet. So it doesn't need to be super fancy. There are some great tools you can use, and I'll get to those in a little bit. But it could be something as simple as having a spreadsheet saying, well, look, this is the video, the photo, the graphic I'm going to post. This is the date and time I'm going to post it. Here's the caption that I'm going to put, and here's the hashtag that I'm going to have going with it. And this just really helps for when you go through those busy periods. You don't have to create content all the time. You can make all of your content over your school holidays or one weekend. And then when you get busy, it's just a matter of going to that spreadsheet, downloading the graphic, copying the caption and the hashtags, and just hitting post when you're on the run. A really easy way to make sure you're staying on top of your content as an influencer. Now, as far as a few of those top tools to help you on those socials, when it comes to post scheduling, there's a whole bunch of tools out there, and it really depends on what you're looking for. Some tools are free, some tools are paid, some tools are cheap, some are expensive, some have loads of features, some just have a couple of features. But it's important to think about what sort of tool you want to get started on and what you need out of it. A few recommendations we have are Pally, Planoly, Facebook Creator Studio, and Later. Definitely do a bit of research and see what works best for you. When it comes to actually creating the content, Canva, the Adobe suite, particularly Photoshop, and Visco are 3 really good platforms you can use to create all of your content. I know I personally love Canva for all content creation because you can edit videos, you can edit photos, you can create graphics and do everything in between. And finally, when it comes to writing the copy, writing the captions, writing the blog post, whatever that might be, I could not recommend using AI more highly. ChatGPT is a fantastic tool for generating hashtags and captions. Copy AI can help with longer form bits of content, and Quillbot can help make all of your captions sound really intellectual or really casual, but you can sort of upload your own brand voice, and Quillbot can help make sure all of the captions, all the content you're creating is coming through in your own brand voice. So I definitely recommend looking at finding some tools to help you with your social media. And these are a couple of our favorites that we'd highly recommend. So when it comes to planning your content, I'd recommend now getting a piece of paper, going back to that notes page, hitting pause and spending a little bit of time actually planning out your content. And to do this, looking at the following headings. So again, going back to those platforms, what sort of content is typically shared on those platforms? Is it mostly videos, text, or images? Again, looking at your audience. What are your audience looking for from that platform when they're online? Are they particularly going to TikTok because they want to learn new things? Are they going to Instagram because they just want really aesthetically pleasing images? And then make a couple of notes under the 4 headings of entertain, inspire, educate, and promote. See if you can brainstorm 4 or 5 different types of posts under each of those headings that you could post related to your niche that your audience are going to really engage in. I'd highly recommend hitting pause now and spending a little bit of time making those notes. Awesome, fabulous. So assuming you've hit pause, assuming you've made those notes, let's keep charging on. And next up, it's having a look at how we can optimize our profile. So we built our foundations. We know what sort of niche we're going to be posting in. We know what sort of platform we're posting on, who we're posting for, and how we're going to be different to our competitors. We've had a look at how we can create really beautiful, authentic content. Now, how do we actually just spread the word about our influencer profile? Get that word out there, make sure other people are finding out about us, and our follower numbers are ticking up. Well, that's what we do when it comes to optimizing our profile. When it comes to optimizing our profile, I highly recommend having a clear social media strategy. Now, a strategy isn't something you just set and forget. A strategy is something that you're always tweaking, refining, adapting, and making better. And when it comes to your social media strategy, you want to consider the following 5 things. Now, these are just really good rules of thumb that will make sure that whatever platform you're on really likes your account, really likes your content, and is more likely to share you to a broader audience. Firstly, you want to make sure your content is top notch. If you're putting out rubbish content, a platform is going to be really quick to totally shut your account down. When you think about it, all of these social media platforms, they make money, and their metrics for success are based on how long do people spend on that platform. And I know for all of us, we've opened a platform before, whether it was Facebook, Insta, TikTok, or something totally different, and our feed's just been pretty rubbish. There's not been a lot of content that we really like. There's not been a lot of content that we really resonate with. And we go, oh, this is rubbish. I'm going to scroll for a minute or two. I'm going to close this and I'll come back to it later. That's not what the social media platforms want. The social media platforms want to be serving up the best content that is as relevant as possible to their audience. So make sure that you're really investing in your content and you have really high quality content. The next one is consistency. Consistency is key, and that's what social media algorithms really like, and that's what your audience really likes as well. We as humans, we're creatures of habit. We like to know that at 6 p.m. every Tuesday night, a new episode of our favorite show is coming out. And with that, it's the same with our social media influencers. We want to know that at 10 a.m. every Saturday, our influencer is posting a new piece of content that we really love. So make sure to set a bit of a content schedule. Set yourself a goal of saying, yep, at this time on this day of the week, I'm going to post a new piece of content, and really try and stick with it. When it comes to consistency, again, it's important to remember that you are in school, you're busy, you have competing priorities, and that's okay. So don't feel like you have to aim too high. A post a week or a post every 2 weeks is totally fine. The next one is collaboration. Now, collaboration is a really great way to grow your audience. If you're just sort of operating in your own lane, doing your own content, not really reaching out at all, you're only going to really appeal to quite a narrow demographic of people. But what you want to do is find other accounts like yours and collaborate with them and say, hey, look, why don't we create a piece of content together? I'll share it on my account and tag you, and you can share it on your account and tag me. And that way, both of your followers find out about each other. And chances are you're going to get some more followers that way. Another great way to make friends with whatever social media platform you're on is by utilizing new features. All of these social media platforms, they're always putting out new features that they're wanting their creators to try. And if you're like the first person to jump on Instagram Reels, or if you're the first person to jump on TikTok Shop, those social media platforms are going to be like, hey, this is a really good account. They're using our new features. We want everyone to use our new features. Why don't we showcase them to our entire audience and show them how great these new features are? So don't be afraid to play around and experiment with those new features. The platforms will reward you for that. And finally, engagement is absolutely key. You want to make sure that your audience are liking, they're commenting, and they're sharing. So make sure as you're crafting your content, think about what would make my audience like this post, what would make them comment on this post, and what would make them send this post to their friends. Those engagement metrics are really, really key. And that's at the end of the day, how a platform measures how good your content is and how strong your profile is as well. So it's important to consider these 5 key things as part of your social media strategy as you grow your influencer brand. Now, when it comes to using your strategy and refining your strategy, analytics are so important. Now, every social media platform has an analytics tool where you can essentially see how well is your page, how well is your content actually performing. And it's really important to do that because at the end of the day, you don't want to be producing all of this content that your audience are like, oh, this is boring. I don't like this. I'm going to start unfollowing. You want to be able to pick that up really, really quickly and find a way to fix that before all of your followers unfollow you. So I highly recommend whatever platform you're on, check out your analytics. And a few things to look at is how each of your posts are performing. I always recommend if you're batching content for 3 months at a time, if you sort of sit down over your school holidays, create all of your content for the term ahead, and then let it drip feed. At the end of that term, the following school holidays, before you create your next batch of content, go back through your analytics and say, well, what posts performed the best? Did my audience prefer videos over photos? Do they prefer educational pieces over inspirational pieces? And adapt your strategy based on that. I also recommend having a look at who your audience actually is. Now, on most of these platforms, and as we can see on the screen, I've got some analytics for YouTube, for TikTok, and for Instagram. You can actually see the age range of your followers. You can see the gender split of your followers, and you can see the times of day and days of the week that your followers are online. So you might say, well, look, I think my audience persona is 15-year-old males, and I think they're online at 8 p.m. on a Monday night. But what you might find is that your audience is actually 23-year-old females, and they're most active at 2 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. So it's really important, again, to be checking those analytics to figure out who your followers actually are when they're online and what sort of content they're looking for. So make sure to spend a lot of time on those analytics. Now, another great way to grow your account is to link all of your accounts. I know I said pick 1 or 2 platforms, but if you are someone that is going out there and saying, well, look, I want to have a presence on absolutely every platform, I highly recommend checking out Linktree. Linktree is a free tool that is web-based. So it's just a website. You head to Linktree and you can create essentially a landing page with all of your links to all of your different profiles on it, totally free of charge. And that's just a really great thing to have in your TikTok bio, in your Instagram bio, on your website, in your LinkedIn. So if people want to find out more about you, if they're like, look, I am loving your LinkedIn content, what else have you got? They can check out your Insta account, your TikTok account, and go to your website as well. So I'd highly recommend checking out Linktree. Now, another great way to optimize your profile is by running these experiments. So as part of your your strategy should never stay the same. Your strategy should always be changing because at the end of the day, these platforms are changing and you should always use your analytics to inform your strategy. So change your strategy based on what your analytics are telling you. And a great way to change your strategy up in a very controlled, very precise way is to run experiments. Now, these experiments can be just like the experiments you run in science classes. And I always recommend with these having a hypothesis, having constants, variables, a success criteria, and measuring your results. So the way a social media experiment works, you might want to run a couple of these at a time and give them a little bit of time to run. I always say give a social media experiment a couple of weeks or a couple of months just to let it breathe and see how it goes. And then come back at the end of that experiment and make some changes accordingly. So when it comes to a social media experiment, firstly, you want to have a hypothesis. Now, your hypothesis, like in a science experiment, is what are you trying to test and what do you think will happen? You might say, for example, I think that by posting more educational content and less inspirational content, my follower count is going to increase. So you say, yep, that's the thing that I'm going to test, posting more education, less inspiration to increase my followers. And what you're going to do is you're going to have some things that stay constant, stay the same, things you do not change. So that would be things like your brand persona. You're not going to change your influencer persona at all. You're going to talk in the same way. Your content is going to look the same. You're going to be posting on the same platforms at the same time of day, at the same day of the week, and all of that's going to stay the same. But the variable is changing your content calendar. Instead of posting a education piece once a month, you might not post education pieces at all. You might, instead of posting an inspirational piece once a month, you might not post inspirational pieces at all, but you're going to be doing 2 educational pieces a month as opposed to 1. So changing that one thing that might have an effect. Then what you're going to do is have success criteria. Success criteria really says, well, look, what does a successful experiment look like? And what you might do is you might say, well, look, over the course of a 1-month period, I normally gain an extra 10 followers a month. For me, I would consider this experiment successful if I gained 20 or more followers in the next month. So really clearly you can see, all right, if I'm keeping everything the same, but the only thing I'm changing is posting less inspirational, more educational pieces, and my follower increase goes from 10 followers a month to 20 followers a month, that's successful. Then you run the experiment. You actually go out, you change your content calendar, you change some of your content, and at the end of that month, you come back and you measure the results. You go back and have a look at the experiment and say, well, look, how many followers did I get in the past month? If it was 10 followers or less, you might say, well, that experiment was unsuccessful. My audience obviously still want inspirational posts and there was too much education there. But if your follower count increased by 20 followers or more, you say, well, look, that was really good. I'm going to wipe inspirational posts entirely from my content calendar and add in extra education posts every month from now on. That was a successful experiment. And that's how you can change your social media strategy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you about a couple of minutes. I'd recommend hitting pause now. I'm going to keep going, but hit pause for a couple of minutes on that piece of paper or on that notes page. I want you to see if you can brainstorm 2 or 3 social media experiments that you might want to run after you've got your social media profile and your influencer brand up and running. Think about that hypothesis. What are the things that will stay the same? What are you going to change? What does success look like? And how are you going to measure those results? I'd recommend hitting pause and quickly making a couple of notes now. Awesome. So assuming you've hit pause, we've had a look at those social media experiments. The final piece of this puzzle is how to grow our reach. So what are some of the strategies? What are some of the hacks out there to be able to grow your audience? Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that this is always changing. Social media platforms, they're always updating their algorithm. They're always changing what they're looking for in good accounts. So what works now might not work in a year's time. And it's important for you as a social media influencer to understand that the algorithm's always changing and what used to work won't always work. You've got to be constantly testing new things, constantly running experiments, and constantly researching to figure out what other people are saying about the algorithm. But at the moment, these are some of my top tips on how you can grow your reach as a social media influencer. The first one is work with the algorithm and be consistent. So as I mentioned before, consistency is key. Both your audience and the social media platform you're on really value consistency. So understand how many times a week are you going to be posting, what time of day are you going to post, and give your audience something to look forward to. The next one is use buzzwords in your post. Again, social media platforms want people spending as much time as possible on their platform, and they're much more likely to show posts to people that are trending. So make sure to think about what are the buzzwords in your industry or in your niche? What are people talking about? What are the things that are really trending right now? And use as many of those as you can in your caption, in your post title, and in the actual content that you're creating. The next one is use your hashtags. Hashtags are, again, a great way for the social media platform to figure out what are you actually talking about in your post and to serve it to other people that are interested in the same thing. A lot of people on social media platforms, their algorithm is largely based on the hashtags that power the posts that they're engaging with. So make sure, I always recommend at the moment, it's about 5 to 10 strong hashtags is what's recommended. But again, that changes all the time. But I'd say if you can do a bit of research, ChatGPT is great for recommending hashtags, by the way. See if you can find 5 or 10 really strong hashtags to include in your post, either in the caption or in the first comment. The next one is collaborate with other accounts. So, you know how we did the competitor analysis earlier? Well, those competitors can actually be a good thing. I'd highly recommend reaching out to them and saying, hey, can we create content together? I'll post the content on my account and tag you, so my followers will give you a follow. If you can post the content on your account and tag me, so your followers give me a follow. Something that I'd really highly recommend is collaborating with those other accounts. And I know a really good example of this that we've got on the screen is on TikTok, Happy Kelly. Happy Kelly does all these different dance videos, and she collaborates with so many different dance influencers to create different content. And they both post it, they both tag each other, and all those different accounts grow at the same time, which is really great to see. So those are just a couple of my top tips for you guys on how to grow your accounts. That's really making sure you're being consistent, you're working with the algorithm, you're using those buzzwords, you're using those hashtags, and you're also collaborating with other accounts. Those are definitely some top tips for you guys on how you can grow your social media profile. But that brings us to the end of the masterclass. I'm conscious for many of you watching, it's starting to get late into the evening. And if you're watching this back, I'm sure you've got other things that you need to be doing. So we're going to bring this masterclass to a close. But as far as what we've covered today, it's been a pretty action-packed hour this past hour, looking at how you can build, launch, and grow your own influencer brand on a social media platform of your choice. What we've had a look at was a few key things. We firstly started by finding a platform and a niche relevant to our interests. And remember, you can never niche down too far. Train spotting, plane spotting, board game reviews. That's all stuff that people are looking for. Then what you want to do is create a really strong influencer brand and persona. As a reminder, I know even for myself, I see Scott Millar as a character that I get into when I am in that persona, and then I can get out of character when I hang out with my friends and family. So think about, what do you want that persona, that character to look like? How do they walk? How do they talk? What are they interested in? Create a plan to design engaging content for your audience, making sure it looks on brand, it's using the same sort of vocabulary, and you're using all those different content pillars. And finally, we're looking at how we can grow that brand. Some of those top tips with social media experiments, leaning into our analytics and collaborating with other accounts as well. So it's been a pretty